Hello and welcome to my record room in sunny Los Angeles. Today a slightly different kind of video. I'm doing a contest entry. This is in celebration of Poetry on Plastic. It's a channel which is celebrating 10,000 subscribers. And Michael, who does the presentations on that channel, he inspired me actually to get started with doing these YouTube videos, partly because he talked mainly about classical music and talked about it in a very accessible, interesting way, very knowledgeable. He is himself a professional musician, and so I really wanted to do this contest entry. Okay, so we have a bunch of really interesting questions. The first one is probably the easiest, but also maybe the hardest, because it was to show a classical record. Well, I have literally thousands of classical records. That's what I started collecting when I was 10 years old. And I still have many of them dating back to that time, as well as ones I've got more recently. So I was really racking my brains about what to show. And then I just happened to be listening to a wonderful record of English music. And since I'm English, that seemed very appropriate to feature. And it's by a composer not many of you may know about. He's an early 20th century composer, the generation after Edward Elgar, but before we get into people like Benjamin Britten and Michael Tippett. And that composer is Frank Bridge. And actually Frank Bridge was Benjamin Britten's teacher at the Royal College of Music. So this record hits a real sweet spot for me. I love Decca records and EMI records, and I do think amongst the most undervalued EMI records are those from the 70s, be they new recordings or reissues of earlier recordings. The very early EMI Columbias are extremely hard and extremely expensive to find in their original pressings. But these later editions, when they're reissued, sound very, very good indeed, even though they are mastered with a solid-state mastering chain. Anyway, this is one of the original recordings from the mid-70s, and it's one of the first records of Bridge to really hit the mainstream. He wasn't very well represented on record up until this time, and this was a record that really started to change people's minds about him. It features a range of orchestral works written throughout his career. I guess the two main pieces are The Sea and Enter Spring. And it's interesting to listen to The Sea because it's in a very typical late romantic style, but it's not at all like Debussy's work, La Mer. It's much more traditional, but very, very evocative. But once you move into his later music, and in particular this piece on here called Enter Spring, you're in a completely different world with extraordinary flourishes of orchestration. And you really can hear something of Debussy in that work. Now, it's really interesting to compare Frank Bridge's The Sea with the music depicting the sea by his pupil, Benjamin Britten, music from Britten's opera Peter Grimes. Now, Peter Grimes was a huge success. It kind of re-put English opera on the map and is performed widely to this day. It's an intense psychological drama set against the backdrop of a fishing village on the east coast of England, close to where Britten himself lived most of his life. And the sea interludes in Peter Grimes have been extracted from the opera and are frequently performed in concert. And this is my cue to show another amazing record from this period. I've actually featured this in some of my earlier videos. This is a recording of the four sea interludes from Peter Grimes and the Passacaglia. This is another spectacular record from EMI, mid-70s. I think this one was recorded same year, 1976, this time with the London Symphony Orchestra and André Previn. This is another demonstration record, but this one sounds every bit as good and is not nearly so well known. And I will just mention that Charles Groves, the conductor here, he made a whole series of records of more obscure English music for EMI in the 70s, going into the 80s, I believe, some film music as well. And a lot of these have been gathered together in a really good CD box, which I highly recommend you seek out, although I think at the moment it might be a little bit expensive to find, but you might find it more reasonably on the second-hand market. Who knows, it may be reissued. But any of these records, if you come across them, and you do come across them, even here in America, I highly recommend, but this one in particular, spectacular sonics. So before we move on, I thought I'd just feature a few more classical records, simply because why not? I have so many wonderful records, classical in particular, both reissues and original pressings, and I thought I'd show a few slightly rarer things that, in a blatant piece of pandering, I thought would be of particular interest to Michael. Now, one of his favorite conductors is Georg Solti, and I must say that I have been prompted to investigate some Solti recordings that otherwise I've passed over, simply as a result of Michael praising them so highly. One of them is the set of the Brahms symphonies with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, which I love. It's wonderful. It's a different kind of Brahms. It's very athletic, muscular, and the sound is just wonderful. Now, Solti recorded most of his career, later part of his career, with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, which he was the artistic director for many, many years. Before that, he spent a lot of time in London and was recording with London Symphony Orchestra. And I highly recommend those, in particular the Bartók records, which are just splendid. But before all of that, he had a very special relationship with the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra. And I just love these records. I mean, in general, I will buy any early Decca record with the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra, in part because they're just such a distinctive sounding orchestra. One of the really fun things about collecting classical records is when you go back into these earlier recordings, orchestras really did sound different from each other. You know, the Vienna Phil sounded different from the Berlin Phil, sounded different from the French orchestras, sounded different from the American orchestras, and all sounded different from the Russian orchestras. Now, those differences have kind of changed over the time. Those differences are really not so evident. Most orchestras start to sound the same. But the Vienna Philharmonic always has this distinctive sound, and that's partly because the instruments, in particular the wind and brass instruments, are passed down from generation to generation of player. And they are typically, in the wind and the brass, a slightly more wider bore. That's the actual size of the interior of the instrument. They're wider bore instruments. It gives them a somewhat richer, fatter sound. And it's one of the reasons why the brass sound of a Vienna Phil is so distinctive. If you've listened to the recent recording of John Williams conducting his music with the Vienna Philharmonic, I mean, you really hear that to great effect in pieces like Jurassic Park. Anyway, I'm going to show some early recordings of his with the Vienna Phil, and it's a trio of Beethoven symphonies. This is the number 7, and we have number 5 here, and then up on the wall we have number 3. And the other thing that's wonderful about these, I'm so lucky to have these. These are the original early wideband pressings. They even have the groove in the label. There's a little groove in here. These, mastered all tube, all analog. And these are the symphonies which I think are very suited to Solti's fiery temperament, and I love these performances. You used to be able to get them on really good Decca Legends 2 for 357. I don't know if that's still available, or you certainly find it secondhand, but it's a good remastering and well worth seeking out. These records are also available in later editions, and they sound very good indeed. I mean, there are early London pressings which are much, much cheaper. I mean, I wouldn't even dream of trying to find these today. I got these many, many, many years ago. They're very expensive. And then just one other record I wanted to highlight, not a record you would necessarily know about at all, but this is Solti's recording of the Tchaikovsky Serenade for Strings and Mozart's Eine kleine Nacht music with the Israel Philharmonic Orchestra. And I just love this record. It's wonderful sound, really energetic, lively performances. And this is in sort of the earlier days of the Israel Philharmonic, and they've often been considered something of a second-class orchestra over the years. I really don't think that's been true for a long time, but certainly back in these days, and doing a record like this on Decca with a high-profile conductor like Schulte would have been a real coup for them. And it's a so-called blueback, and again, it is an early pressing. This sounds just lovely. I love this record. Now, one of my prized possessions. This is a box set that I got when it came out, and I'm so happy I have this. I think I've seen it once in the bins, once, and I actually bought it as a present for someone who I knew loved this composer. And I know Michael loves this composer. So here we go. Shostakovich, the Complete Symphonies. Now, this was issued on EMI Melodia. These are all recordings made by the Russian state organization Melodia, and these were issued in different countries, different pressings, but the ones to always look for are the ones on EMI, made in England. None of the American ones, please. Those are horrible. And what's remarkable about this set is you've got samplings of all the great Russian conductors, some of whom did first performances of these works. We've got Kirill Kondrashin, who's the main person there. Then you've got Yevgeny Mravinsky, who was so famous for conducting with the Leningrad Philharmonic. Yevgeny Svetlanov, again, another major figure in Russian music, and boy, did he make hundreds and hundreds of records. Rudolf Barshai, and then very interestingly, we've got Maxim Shostakovich, and this is the composer's son. And this set contains his amazing, to me, never surpassed recording of the 15th Symphony, the last symphony. Beautifully recorded. I mean, you don't have to make any allowances for the sound. Some of the Melodia recordings, you do have to make allowances for the sound, but not the 15th Symphony. And for many years, this was the only place you could find this recording. I'm not even sure it's available on CD, except as part of a complete set, which is probably out of print. Shostakovich's son did go on to do a complete cycle of the symphonies, which actually I must pick up. I would love to have that. But this set, oh, it's got this wonderful booklet. Look at this beautiful pencil sketch of Shostakovich, and full notes and photographs. You know, it's just wonderful. If you are a Shostakovich fan, you want to try and pick up this set. And Michael, if you ever find this, buy it immediately. It's absolutely wonderful. Moving on to question 2, the heaviest sounding record in your collection. Well, I barely had to think about this, and I'm not a heavy metal person, so it's not heavy metal. But this record is kind of ground zero for so many musicians. This record came out 48 years ago this week, as I was reminded on my Facebook feed when there was a post from DGM Live. DGM Live is the official website for all things King Crimson. And this record, which came out in 1974, is just an extraordinary record. We have here Robert Fripp on guitars, we have Bill Bruford on drums, and John Wetton on bass and vocals. And up until this point, Crimson had gone through various iterations, starting off with the band that we know from In the Court of the Crimson King. But here we have a power trio with just a few extra musicians. This album was recorded essentially live, and it has that feel to it. And my God, the sound is just so massive, so fat sounding. Now, this is not an original pressing. This is a reissue, a British reissue on the Polydor label. But these Polydor reissues sound fantastic. They are really fine. You really don't lose much in comparison to the original Island pressings, pink label pressings. I would dearly love to have this in a pink label pressing, but that's a lot of money, and to find a clean copy is very difficult. This is such an amazing album, and several of these tracks have never left the live Crimson repertoire, in particular Red and Starless. Now, Starless was a huge feature of Crimson's performances when they formed in their latest version. I guess it must have been almost like 10 years ago, where they had 3 drummers in the front line and then 4 musicians in the back line, including Robert Fripp, Mel Collins on sax, who is a guest musician on this record, and also the wonderful Tony Levin on bass, who plays with Peter Gabriel, and everyone else is just simply one of the greatest bass players ever. This is just an incredible record. It sounds enormous. One of the things I love about Crimson, and I think if pressed I would say that Crimson is my favorite rock group, they are the group that comes closest to classical music in terms of the complexity of their music. I mean, it reminds me a lot of Stravinsky in terms of its complicated time patterns, time signatures. Everything about their music is ornery, difficult to play, very difficult to play, virtuosic. I mean, to watch Robert Fripp sitting up there on stage, he just sits on a chair, barely moves, and he's playing the most fiendishly difficult, extraordinary stuff. I mean, they are an amazing band. Who knows if it will ever perform together live, but this record, I cannot recommend it highly enough. I will also say that the more recent reissues are perfectly acceptable. There's a 200-gram version of this, which was issued from the original master tapes, but I'm sure it had a digital step. There's also the Steven Wilson remix. Both of them, they don't have quite the, how should I put it, foundational power of this pressing, but they sound really, really good, and you will get the general idea. So question 3, an artist or group you got into primarily through vinyl record collecting. I had to think a little bit about this one. There were several candidates, but then it occurred to me, yeah, these are the guys I need to talk about. So around 2010, I'd had major back surgery and was sort of languishing at home, recovering, spending a lot of time in bed, hobbling around the apartment, etc. And I was watching David Letterman one night, and he was doing one of the fun things he often does. He was having a week of great drummers. So every night he had a different drummer playing, doing a solo performance, just them on their own. And one of the nights he had this guy I'd never heard of called Gavin Harrison, and just blew me away. And I was like, who is this guy? Who does he play with? So I go on to trusty Wikipedia, and he found out that he was currently a member of a band called, here we go, Porcupine Tree. I'd never heard of them. So I did a little bit of digging and found out that Porcupine Tree was essentially the name under which an English musician called Steven Wilson had been making records since the 90s. The personnel of Porcupine Tree had changed over the years, but latterly it consisted mainly of Steven Wilson, Gavin Harrison, and Richard Barbieri. And Richard Barbieri may be a familiar name to some of you. He was the keyboard player with Japan, a group I loved in the 80s and continue to love the work of David Sylvian when he was the lead singer of Japan and branched off into an absolutely extraordinary, unique, and wonderful solo career. But Richard Barbieri played keyboards in that band. Anyway, at this time, around 2010, I didn't know it, but the band was going to kind of go on hiatus for a while. I went online. There's a wonderful site in England called Burning Shed, and they specialize in this kind of neo-progressive, interesting art rock kind of releases. And they had this set This was a limited edition on vinyl. This is a record of a series of live performances in 2008, and it's Barbieri, Harrison, Wilson, and then Colin Edwin is also still in the band at this time. Now, Steven Wilson has always been a huge proponent of vinyl, so he always puts out his records in these beautiful editions. Look at this, with all this beautiful artwork, just fantastic stuff. This is a prized possession and beautifully recorded. The sound at his gigs is stunning. How would I describe the music? Well, it's definitely neo-progressive, but it doesn't go off into these long, ridiculous riffs, which was kind of the death of progressive music back in the day. He's a stunning songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, and as being a musician is concerned, just the real deal. At this time, around 2010, he was starting to focus more on a solo career, bringing in other musicians, and he then put out his second solo album, this one, which is called Grace for Drowning. It's actually a double LP. And this is heavily influenced by King Crimson. And of course, Crimson's one of my favorite bands. So how could I not love this? Now, Wilson, in his other life, had started to get a lot of work being a remixer, initially for surround sound reissues of mainly 70s progressive rock, etc. People like Crimson, Jethro Tull, Gentle Giant. But then he started to be hired to do just regular stereo remixes. And I thought, if Robert Fripp trusts him, if Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull trusts him, he must really know his stuff. I then realized that I actually had a wonderful album that he had produced by this singer called Anya Garbarek. She's the daughter of Jan Garbarek, the jazz saxophonist. A beautiful record, and I just happened to be listening to it and I noticed, produced by Steven Wilson. I mean, the guy has such amazing studio chops. All his records sound amazing. I mean, the solo album he did after this, he actually was engineered by Alan Parsons. He of, Dark Side of the Moon, etc. He is a tremendous musician, and I love all his solo records. I went back and started picking up the other Porcupine Tree records. There's a whole bunch of them. I guess a couple of the most famous ones, good places to start, is this one, In Absentia, and then this one, Fear of a Blank Planet. And then he actually has gone back through his entire catalogue in the last sort of 7-8 years, right through it, remastering. One of the things he's done is taken out a lot of the compression, so these records sound even better. He did a couple of box sets of early Porcupine Tree. Here's one of them. I mean, you can just see how beautiful this stuff is. Again, it has a big book with it, with lots of wonderful photos and articles, history of the band, etc. I mean, these are just beautifully put together. They're like artworks in their own right. And then, surprisingly, everyone thought Porcupine Tree had kind of gone away. Steven Wilson was just doing his solo career. And then I think it was earlier this year, or maybe last year, they announced there was going to be a new Porcupine Tree record. And it came out a few months ago. This is it. Closure Continuation. The version of it you want to get is this triple vinyl version. Again, look at this beautiful artwork. Just gorgeous. And this is the version to get. It's 3 albums cut at 45 on clear vinyl. It sounds amazing. And they're on tour. And I went to see them at the Greek Theatre a couple of weeks ago. They were absolutely sensational. One of the things that was really striking to me was the contribution of Richard Barbieri. His approach to keyboards is very distinctive, somewhat different from other people. He's not playing lots of notes. He's all about textures, atmospheres, soundscapes, very influenced by Brian Eno, not surprisingly, and just a wonderful contribution to the show. They're, I think, just about to resume touring in Europe, so if you're in Europe and you're interested, you should go check them out. They really are an amazing band, and this was an incredible discovery that I never would have made had it not been for records. Question number 4, show a foreign record, maybe even in an imported pressing, and I immediately knew what to show. This is someone who's actually, speaking of Japan, worked extensively with David Sylvian, and I first discovered him from seeing the film Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence with David Bowie, and this artist, Ryuichi Sakamoto, he played the lead opposite David Bowie. He played the harsh camp commandant where David Bowie was imprisoned in Japan. A fantastic movie. And Sakamoto had written the haunting, beautiful soundtrack, including the main theme, which went on to have a life of its own. And at that time, it was like, who is this guy? People said he's a pop star, etc. And I started to look into him at that time in the 80s. He was just starting a solo career. I picked up a bunch of his records. And then, of course, he started out with a Japanese band called Yellow Magic Orchestra, YMO. And they were, I guess, in a way, Japan's answer to Kraftwerk. Much more poppy, but electronics based. And just wonderful stuff. And some years ago, I was in Amoeba Music here in Hollywood, a wonderful music store, and I came across this. This is just a beautiful box set. It's 4 LPs and it's YMO sealed. Basically, it's a greatest hits collection, but that doesn't really do it justice. I'm not going to take all the records out, but I will just quickly show you the flyers that come with it. You've got this photograph of the band. You've got this insert with pictures of their albums. And then you've got this beautiful book, unfortunately in Japanese. But look, how beautiful is that? I mean, this is the thing about Japanese records, and we're going to get into this in a moment a bit more. They're just presented beautifully. Look at this. This is just a wonderful set, beautifully mastered, and a great starting place for anyone wanting to investigate YMO. They are actually starting to get some really nice reissues. I'll be mentioning that again in a moment. But for a foreign band in an imported pressing, this is one of my prized possessions. It's in perfect condition. Sounds fantastic. Next question was a record that you want to see on vinyl. I didn't have to even think about this. When this record came out, I was just, oh my god, this is not only one of this artist's best records, this is a record, this is going to be one of my favorite records of all time. And if I was picking 10 Desert Island records, this album would be one of them. It would be in my top 5. It would be, if I had to pick just one rock pop album, this would be it. Brian Eno. This is an album he did in 2003, and it was new ground in some ways, or revisiting old ground. It was his first album in many, many years in which it was a song album. There are all songs on here with him singing. He hadn't done that until going way, way back. He obviously sung occasionally on other records, some of the collaborations. I'm thinking in particular of one with John Cale, wonderful record incidentally. But this was new, all him on his own. And this is such an exquisite record. I have listened to this over and over again. Every time I hear it, I hear something new in the textures. The range of songs is so wide, and just his gift for creating textures and music which is not necessarily the most obvious that you would put behind the lyrics, but it works beautifully. I will mention in particular the song How Many Worlds, which I think would be my one desert island song. And then it ends with an extraordinary song called Bone Bomb. He doesn't actually sing on that, he has someone speaking. And that's a song which is basically in the mind of a suicide bomber. It's her thinking about herself in the minute or so before she blows herself up. It's called Bone Bomb. It's an extraordinary end to an extraordinary album. Unusually for Eno, he usually issues everything on vinyl. This was never issued on vinyl. It's crying out for it. This was 2003. This is a long time ago. He's about to come up with a new album of song material. When is he going to reissue this on vinyl? It must be done on vinyl. It's his masterpiece, as far as I'm concerned. One Eno album, this is it. Amazing. So the final question was basically to come up with a response, I guess some comments about one of Michael's articles or videos. And I thought I would just, because this was on my mind, because I had just picked up some records that related to this, he wrote a piece in The Tracking Angle, Michael Fremer's new website, which, hooray, thank God it's finally up. I've been missing Fremer. I'm one of his unabashed fans. I love the fact that he's something of an eccentric, bit off the wall. I love it. He knows his stuff, and that's all I care about. And I've met him a few times. Great fun, most enjoyable person to talk to. Anyway, Michael had an article we really needed, which was all about buying Japanese vinyl, Japanese pressings. Mainly the emphasis was on where to buy them, but he did talk a little bit about the differing qualities of Japanese vinyl. Now, my experience with Japanese pressings is probably like all of you, varied. At one point in time, I guess around 20 years ago, it was really easy going into somewhere like Amoeba or my other store, Record Surplus. You would find lots of Japanese pressings of Western records, and I picked quite a few up. And I found that it's, just as Michael says in his article, in terms of Japanese pressings of pop music, jazz, etc., it's hit and miss. They're all very quiet in terms of the vinyl, but sometimes the EQ choices are a little odd. They can be light in the bass, and they're often taken not from master tapes, but copies of masters, or even more, a second generation copy. So as I've learned, you basically have to just experiment. You kind of start to know which ones probably to avoid, but then you can also be surprised, as I was recently, and I'll get into that in a moment. So I thought I'd just go through a bunch of my Japanese pressings and just talk about them as my response to that article. You're always on safe ground if it's a Japanese artist. So one of my guilty pleasures is I love all these synthesizer versions of classical music. Obviously the granddaddy of all those is Walter Carlos, now Wendy Carlos. His records of Switched on Bach, which really put the Moog synthesizer on the map. But he was followed closely by this Japanese gentleman, Tomita, who did a whole series of records of electronic versions of classical music. Some of them are better than others. This is a very nice sort of best of collection. Beautiful artwork. That's the thing with these Japanese pressings. They're beautiful. They're usually in really good cardboard and great artwork, etc. And it's always fun if you find the Obi strip. I've had that one for a while. This one I found just recently. This is probably Tomita's best record. This is his realizations of Debussy. Here it's called Clair de Lune. It's also, I think the other version of it's known as Snowflakes Are Dancing, the American version. Anyway, I got this. It sounds fantastic, so much better than the American pressing. A label that I've talked about often that I just love, is the King Super Analog disc. These are reissues of Decca catalog, London catalog, and they're actually remixed as well as remastered. Now, the interesting thing about these is these are put out under the imprimatur of King Super Analog disc, but actually they're also a collaboration with an American company, Cisco, which is the precursor to the current company, Impex. And many of these are actually, even if they're mastered in Japan, they were actually pressed in America, I believe, at RTI. Here's one of them, a great performance, again, of Schulte, Michael, doing Mahler's Fifth. This one was actually pressed in America, but this one, Film Spectacular, Stanley Black, this one is pressed in Japan. This is a version of one of the Stanley Black records for Phase 4, Decca Phase 4 stereo. He did a whole series of movie music records, which are absolutely wonderful. And in the future, I'm going to be doing some videos about Decca Phase 4. I just love these records. They're my guilty pleasure. This is particularly good. I mean, this is so superior even to the regular Decca pressing. I mean, it's dead quiet. The sound is amazing. What I find with these King Super Analog, they open up the sound. If the sound is a little bright, they darken it a bit, but you've just got such a deep sound stage and such deep deeps and high highs, and it's just such a rich sound. I love these Super Analog discs. They are quite expensive now on the used market. I can't believe that when I was first getting back into vinyl, I went and visited Robert Pincus at Cisco Music. They had an office near here in LA, and I just bought a whole clutch of these things. They were all $30 each. This one I got at Amoeba Music recently. It sounds amazing. A more regular Japanese pressing of one of those Phase 4 stereo Stanley Blacks looks like this. This is the album of war music, including the famous Colonel Berge March from Bridge on the River Kwai. Look at this fantastic artwork. I wouldn't say this is superior to the original Decca. It's quite a vinyl, but it was not very much money. I couldn't resist it because I just love those records. It sounds great. Sticking with film music, I recently came across this in the used bins at Record Surplus. How much was it? It was about $10. Japan put out a whole series of these best of collections of James Bond music, and look at this, it's wonderful. It's a gatefold, 2 records, a whole bunch of extra stuff in here. But you've got everything in here. What's nice about this collection is it's not just some of the early John Barry stuff, but it goes forward into The Spy Who Loved Me and a few other things. Oh yes, The Man with the Golden Gun. So it's some of the later 70s stuff. It's got Fillet of Soul from a New Orleans scene in Live and Let Die. Now, the thing about this, it's very clear you're listening to a copy of the master tape, so it doesn't have quite that immediacy that some of the original soundtrack albums have. For example, the original British soundtrack of The Spy Who Loved Me is a fantastic sounding record, Marvin Hamlish score. But it's so much fun to have these all together. It's so much fun. And then speaking of Bond, I have 2 of my absolute favorite John Barry scores on Japanese vinyl. This one up here, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, that's the one with George Lazenby, with the title track using a synthesizer, which is absolutely thrilling. And then I also have this one, You Only Live Twice, which is, again, it's a little different. Both these soundtracks are a little different. This one is much more lyrical. It has the beautiful track, Mountains and Sunsets, and then The Wedding, with the sort of pseudo oriental music influence, but just done beautifully by John Barry. And I love the title song, Nancy Sinatra, although she was so nervous, the poor thing. The final recording of this is assembled from a whole bunch of different takes. This is actually mentioned as I record this at the beginning of October. Amazon has just put all the Bond films onto their service for free on Prime, plus a brand new documentary all about the music, which is essential watching for anyone remotely into Bond music, and who isn't into Bond music. So, you know, I have over the years picked up a few classical records in Japanese pressings. Rarely are they superior in terms of the sound quality to the European ones, be they Philips, for example, or Deutsche Grammophon. But I got this one recently, and one of the things that's lovely about these Japanese pressings is the artwork. Look at this. This is Haitink's recording with the London Philharmonic Orchestra. I think this is from the 70s, might be 60s, but I think it's 70s, of The Rite of Spring. But look at this gorgeous artwork, and actually this is a beautiful copy. I really like this. The sound on this is excellent. But then recently, and I mentioned this in another video, going back to the whole thing, Japanese music, Japanese pressings, yes, go for it. And they often have stuff that is much harder to find in European pressings. I am a huge lover of the music of Toru Takemitsu, and I found a clutch of these Japanese pressings of Deutsche Grammophon issues. I mean, whoops, sorry, that fell out. Look at this beautiful artwork. And here's another one. I mean, this stuff is just beautiful. It's gorgeous. This stuff is not even readily available on compact disc, so I was really excited to find all of these at Amoeba. Now, this is an example of a Japanese pressing of a regular classical record, which is superior to the original. And I think one of the reasons for that is that it's pressed on 2 LPs, still cut at 33, but they're able to spread it out. And this is maybe my favorite recording of the Planets. Andre Previn and the London Symphony Orchestra. I mean, I can assure you the original, just regular postage stamp EMI British pressing sounds phenomenal. There's also a reissue done by HiQ, which sounds very good. A slightly noisier vinyl. But this 2 LP version on Toshiba just beats them all. It's a fantastic set. Cannot recommend this highly enough. But here's a record that the Japanese pressing is not better. It's quieter for sure. I've mentioned this in a recent video. This is a record I've been trying to find a clean pressing of forever. This is part of a series of RCA film scores that Charles Gerhardt recorded for RCA. It's a spectacular series, both in terms of the repertoire that's recorded, but also the sound engineered by Kenneth Wilkinson with the National Philharmonic Orchestra, a scratch orchestra made up of the best players in London. They do a suite from Star Wars, and then also Close Encounters. They do really a long chunk, really, from the end of the film. You get all this incredible writing by John Williams, more avant-garde use of the orchestra. It's my favorite John Williams score, hands down, Close Encounters. This is an incredible record, but I've gone through various. I've tried to get a clean British, a clean American. I got this. This was definitely the cleanest sounding version, but it lacked bass. But fortunately, I just recently found an American pressing, regular American pressing, and it's not noisy, cleaned it up, and it sounds great. So I think I'm done. And so, you know, you just have to kind of take a chance, really. But I was in my local store recently, Record Surplus, and they had a bunch of Japanese pressings, and I thought, shall I try these? And Herb Albert, 3 of his records with Tijuana Brass. There's another one, and another one. I'm a good customer there, so they said, yeah, try it. If you don't like it, bring it back. Now, the thing is, these Herb Albert records, the original American pressings, if you can find a clean one, they sound incredible. They are beautifully engineered, beautifully mastered. They are just fantastic. And, you know, I love Tijuana brass. Again, one of my guilty pleasures has been since I was a kid. I've got a couple of clean American pressings, not of these records, but I thought, I'll give these a try. And lo and behold, they're amazing. Dead quiet, beautiful sound, rich, full, deep. Couldn't ask for anything more. And I got these, you know, they weren't cheap, but they weren't crazy expensive. They were sort of in the 20 up, between 20 and 30. And then they also had in there, I couldn't believe it. I was so excited about this. One of my favorite jazz labels, but hard to find clean vinyl. CTI. This was the label started by Creed Taylor, and I found 2 albums. I was so happy. This one, Antonio Carlos Jobim, Tide, and I thought, okay, I'm just gonna take the risk. If it's not good, I'll take it back or whatever. And it's really hard to find clean copies of these American pressings. It's absolutely gorgeous, dead quiet, rich, full sound. And then they had, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. This is maybe my favorite Quincy Jones record. I've been looking for a clean copy forever. I would haunt Discogs. They would have copies, but they'd be really expensive and rarely more than a VG Plus. And I don't want to take the risk. Smackwater Jack. This is the album that has the theme, his arrangement of his theme music from A Man Called Ironside, which Quentin Tarantino used in Killing Bill. And I love this record. It's such a great record, even though it has the theme song from The Cosby Show, and you have Bill Cosby doing some weird sounds on it, and it's kind of weird to listen to that. But it's got so much other great stuff on it. I mean, his version of What's Going On is spectacular. Cast Your Fate to the Wind, Ironside, more film music, theme from the Anderson tapes, the Sean Connery thriller. And then it finishes off with this wonderful sort of medley, Guitar Blues Odyssey from Roots to Fruits. And it's got all these amazing players on it, creme de la creme of the LA, New York studio musicians, just fantastic. And again, I've been looking for this forever, and I was so pleased to find it. Now, you see, here we go. This is where you can't necessarily go with just a generalization with Japanese pressings. This was a whole series of reissues done in Japan in the 80s of the CTI catalog. And I was thinking, well, is this going to be from a digital master? But it was just early enough. I thought maybe it's worth the chance. These sound like they're either from the master tape or from a copy of the master tape. They sound all analog. I mean, I could be wrong. We have been fooled before on this, but no, they sound amazing. So there you go. And I just wanted to finish with Michael mentioned this new series of reissues that are being done on Japanese vinyl. They're being mastered by Bernie Grumman, cut by Bernie Grumman, and then they are actually pressed at Quality Record Pressings, which is Chad Kassam of Acoustic Sounds. That's his pressing plant. And then they come out as Japanese issues, and I picked up one of my favorite Ryuichi Sakamoto solo albums, and this is the one that has, of all people, Adrian Belew playing on it. Adrian Belew played in King Crimson for years. I saw him on tour with David Bowie on the Sound and Vision tour. He was incredible. He's an extraordinary guitarist. This is such a great album. And look, this is digital. It's a cut from a digital master, but it doesn't matter. It sounds superb. There's a whole series of these. I think they've done some of the Yellow Magic Orchestra, which I've definitely got my eye on. They're not cheap, but this one was worth every penny. Okay, so there we go. That's my maybe slightly long series of answers to the questions posed by Michael at Poetry on Plastic. It's a wonderful channel. I urge you to check it out. Hopefully maybe I've shown you something here that you'd be interested in investigating. I've put links to some music below in the description if you want to check out some of the music. And thanks so much for watching my channel. Do please subscribe, give me a like. Just love this community of people who are watching my videos. I wish I could do them more often. It's just a little time consuming when you've got other stuff going on. But thank you so much for watching, and bravo to Michael and Poetry on Plastic. It's a wonderful channel. I urge you to check it. Until we next meet, happy listening.